It is Thursday. It is 2:30 p.m. UTC. It is time for Supercharged. Hi, I'm Surma.
Hi, I'm Mariko.
And we are going to do some WebWorkers. Let's go. So, WebWorkers. Usually on Supercharged, we do more like bleeding edge technology, things that only work in Chrome Canary with like the web platforms flag enabled. But today, with WebWorkers, we're actually using something that has been around for years.
Yeah.
And many browsers, I think even Internet Explorer, multiple versions have support for WebWorkers.
Pretty much.
So you can follow along in whatever browser you are today. And that's new. So Mariko, welcome. I'm very happy to have you here.
Thank you.
Before we dive into code, I think we should make sure that everybody, I'm not sure everybody knows what a web worker really is.
Yes.
And even I'm not sure if I know the right definition of it. Why? Can you maybe bring us all up to
okay,
speed?
cool. Sure. Should I do the picture?
If you want to.
So what would you describe WebWorker? If somebody asks you like one line.
I would
what is
basically
WebWorker?
say it's an actual second thread for JavaScript, like proper parallelism in JavaScript, and then you have some very simple ways to communicate with your original main thread, as it's called.
Right. So, oops. Yep. This one. I had that explanation given to me, and I was like, what do you mean thread? JavaScript is a single thread.
Exactly, and that's what already confuses people, I think.
Yeah. So when I discovered WebWorker when I was trying to make the very similar app that we're going to try to make today, and I wanted to make it performant, and I discovered WebWorker, and I was like, what does that even mean? It was like really confusing. So I pictured it for you. I drew a picture.
You are known on the internet for drawing explanations of things, so I'm very happy that Supercharged gets to enjoy these drawings of yours as well.
So imagine that your browser is a planet, Earth, something. You might know when the garbage collection is, the garbage day schedule with garbage collection. You know all the elements on the planet because HTML elements over there. The web worker, you can think of it as something like International Space Station.
Okay.
It's something that you create from the browser, the Planet browser. You launch it.
I like Planet browser.
Out of the world. It's outside of the Planet browser. But then from Planet browser, you send the data to do all kinds of scientific exploration that happens. So they can do a lot of tasks. But because it is outside of the Planet browser, they cannot touch the elements on the thing. So in the web worker,
that makes a lot of sense.
It does not have it does not have access to window object. It does not have access to document object. Basically, you cannot do anything that touches what's on the screen. But you can do a lot of JavaScript.
True, and that's what we're going to use today.
Yes.
And so this was the first explanation, probably of many to come, because we are introducing some new concepts. But if you have any questions, you people watching us live in the chat, ask them, because I'll be monitoring the chat or the hashtag Supercharged on Twitter or my mentions on Twitter, and I'll try to forward them to Mariko because she's the expert in all of these things. And she will hopefully answer your questions, even if they are about coconuts, Jake. Thank you for making sure that people believe us that this is actually live. So where should we start?
Coconut? I'm sorry.
Jake said in the chat that I should say something about coconuts to prove that this is live.
Oh yeah.
And it
By
is.
the way, somebody who doesn't know Jake is our colleague who's literally sitting.
He did a live stream with
behind
me
us.
2 months ago, 3 months ago, about Service Worker. Who would have thought?
Okay. So as I explained, in order to utilize WebWorker, you kind of have to have a lot of JavaScript to do. Like something that is not changing the visual or making a DOM element. It's a lot of JavaScript. So I have a plan for today that kind of thought of. So what if so I know Matt did last Supercharged did an image processing.
Yeah, we did
in
WebGL.
But I don't know how to speak WebGL, but I know how to do 2D canvas. So what if we do a lot of image processing in 2D canvas, right? And you do basically image filters, do a lot of using the bits thing. And then that involves a lot of
the bits thing.
that thing, yeah, that thing, the pixel.
If you don't know what
thing
we're talking about, I recommend you watch the previous live stream after we're done. Watch us first, then watch the other one, because we have many live streams on this channel, which you also should subscribe to.
So here's the very simple diagram of what's in my head.
Okay,
So
this is
I'm
what we're going to
have-
build.
Yeah. So I'm
Okay.
gonna have an input button that opens up the file dialog. So
Okay.
it's like, I want to edit this image, right?
Okay.
That is loaded into the screen, and then when that gets loaded into screen, it does something. Let's say, like, it's kind of like an Instagram filter, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know, let's make it like a black and white, or like, you know,
Any kind
warm,
of image
cool.
processing.
Yeah,
That's
and
what
then
image processing.
displayed it on the screen. Because I suspect that doing those filter thing involves a lot of computation, and
Yeah.
maybe it's a good example to put it into WebWorkers. So let's get into first making that application before even we talk about
Let's go for it.
WebWorker. All right. So I have index.html, and I started a simple server that is serving that file. So let's say,
Okay, cool.
let's just see, like, you know, I'm not lying. Let's say hi, and then if I reload it, it just shows up as a hi. So that's working. So for now, let's just say title.
And we're done. See you next time.
Supercharged
Oh, you're even on brand. That's so good.
emoji, and then.
No, it's one word.
Thank you very much for reminding me that. So as I mentioned, I need to have input button. So input.
We have the first question for you on the chat. What do you use to draw your diagrams?
I use iPad.
There
and
you go.
Apple Pencil.
Okay.
Do they care about the app that I use? There's like a bunch of apps that I can recommend later if you like want to do it. Yeah.
Speaking of, follow Mariko on Twitter as well.
Yep.
If you have more drawings, that's the place to go. We have the link in the description.
Cool. So when you have an input element, you can specify what kind of input it is. And in this case, we're going to use file. And then when you are doing the file input, you can also specify what kind of file this input accepts.
Yeah.
So accept. And this time, we want to only deal with image. Like, you don't want user to accidentally
Like a
load
JSON file.
JSON file or something and just like
HTML.
error everywhere. Like, let's do that. So image, image, and then let's say star, so that like in PNG, JPEG, bitmap, anything accept it, and just
Cool.
have it in.
Also, it uses the MIME type, not the file extension.
Right.
Okay.
ID, input.
Because someone brought up that we are missing some meta tags in the header. That is a good opportunity to mention this is not production-ready code. This is only supposed to work on Mariko's screen just now. It's more about the concepts that she's going to use and explain to you. You can then later on go to our repository on GitHub, grab the code, and add all the meta headers that you want. PR is welcome.
That's a good PR for PR.
Exactly.
So choose file or something, right? So if I have that, well, I should have 4 input. And then let's reload this file. And then I have file input. Right now, it's very small, so make it bigger.
Yeah.
If I click it, the file dialog opens up. And then I can select it, image,
OK.
and then open it. But
And then nothing
right
happens.
now, nothing happens. Right now.
Why would it? You haven't written anything.
Nothing written it. So before dive into, so do you have this thing where like you start doing this and then like unless you style it somewhat nicely, you can't really move because like your motivation is not.
No, I'm the exact other way around. Like, I hate making my things pretty. I just want to get the core functionality done and then hand it off to someone else.
So as you can see, I'm a visual person.
You don't say, the person who draws on Twitter.
I mean, I'm not like no way like a designer or anything, but like I'm definitely drawn to like visual, like shiny things. So let me just style it quick.
Yeah, go for it. I mean,
so, I'm just gonna style it bluntly. You can take questions or.
I guess I can actually.
First of all, I have a question for you.
Oh, a question for me from the.
I want to have a ID selector on my CSS.
Yes.
This keyboard does not seem to have a.
So you
Slash.
are actually usually in the New York office.
Yes.
Not here in London with me. She just came over to visit specifically for this live stream. Specifically for this live stream. So she's not used to a UK keyboard. Shift and 3 is the combination for.
Wait. Oh, that was caps
caps
lock. Ah.
There we go.
I'm sure I'll ask
What is
you.
it? Oh, on the American keyboard you have a separate key for the hashtag, right?
Well, where the British pound sign is, it is already listed as a
Okay.
pound.
I see. I see.
I mean, pound, but like pound meaning like a hashtag pound.
Not our currency.
Right.
Words are confusing. All right, keep styling.
Styling. Yep.
I wanted to quickly answer Tim's questions from the chat on the video as well, because it is interesting. We have been talking about modules on the Chrome Dev Summit pretty much recently. It's been on the top of the topic list for many frameworks, switching over to modules or supporting modules. And since we're going to use workers today, it's probably important to mention that no browser yet has support for workers, for modules in workers. The syntax has been specified, how to load a module in a worker, but no browser has actually implemented it. That's something that I guess all browsers have on the roadmap, but I'm also assuming it's not a very high priority for most browsers because very few people actually use workers, which is what I'm hoping to change with this live stream. So maybe after this, we can exert some more pressure on the browser people to speed the process up a little bit.
IPX.
So we have some more colors.
Yes.
This
Let's
looks
make it font size bigger.
I never use the EM type. Maybe I should use it more.
So yeah, that looks good. So what I did was I hidden the like a default input button, and then I made the label part as a clickable.
That's a good old trick.
Yeah.
You have to be careful with accessibility on this one.
So I prepared for this. I care about this thing. I do front-end development.
You go and explain this.
So right now, if I tab it, I can't get to the input element, which should be able to because it is an input element.
Yeah.
But the one that is focusing input element is basically zero width overflow hidden. It's completely hidden, and it's just the display is taking over.
Practically invisible.
Right. So I need to put a focus to this element. So again,
also when the input element is focused, you're going to change the style of the label.
Yes.
Tricky, because what a lot of people do is actually display none the input field, and that is very bad for accessibility because then it becomes non-focusable for people who use screen readers. So this one is a different trick where you make it invisible by giving it a 0 by 0 size, and then making sure the styles are propagated from the input field to the actual.
So I kind of cheated because I couldn't remember the order of like pixel order style and thing. But let's see if this works. So if I tab it, yes.
Nice.
And then tab out. So now I can select it. So now I can see this is selected, enter, and then file opens,
cool.
And then select it. So cool. Now we have something to start with. And that's pretty much the only UI element we will have on this. So
sounds good.
Now
now we have to do something with the image.
Yeah,
right?
let me just change the color. This is not fun. Color, let's say F3.
You're just making those colors up, aren't you?
Yeah, blue is not cool. Teal. Yeah.
Let's go with that.
Okay, so now we get into JavaScript part. So the input element, the native element, will let us have the model for the file, and then let us, give the information about the file that we selected. But we need to access that, and we need to write a JavaScript for it. So let's write a script. And I apologize, I'm going to put everything on index.html.
Yeah, that's how we roll here. No worries about that.
Flipped. So let's do the
Look
JavaScript
at that autocomplete.
part. Don't you think my Sublime setting is superb?
We haven't had Sublime on the stream in a long time. Have you heard of VS Code?
Yes.
Just to be clear, before a flame war starts in the chat again, your editor is fine. As long as you press a key and that character appears on screen, you're set for web development. I don't care about anything else. So if you use WebStorm, if you use Sublime, if you use Notepad++, it all works for web development. So don't ever feel discriminated if you use a different editor from what you see other people using.
Yep. So while Surma is putting the disclaimer about the editor, I just put the
I like the shout out to the old jQuery syntax.
Oh, so this is what I do. So whenever I do reference to the DOM element or HTML element that is already existing in the screen, then even though I don't use jQuery, I just put $, so that mental note of like,
I like it.
I can see like which element object still lives in the memory, and then which one is actually like displayed on the screen. So in this case, input is already on the screen, so I just put the $sign and add event listener. So change event is fired whenever user selects different files.
Yeah.
So another apology, I'm gonna console log the hell out of this code because that's how I code.
That's how the professionals debug. I think that's perfectly fair.
So let's see what kind of event data that we get. So let's tab, select, picture. Oh, I need to do the dev tool, don't I? Inspect, console, something is wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Capitalization of that function call is always weird.
Consistency, something that we don't have on the web. All right, so
we get an event.
Event usually, usually it's like in the target where you want the data to be, right?
Yeah.
And I just happen to know that if it's file, in the target, there will be files.
Ah, so you actually get...
And that's where all of the
And that's an
information.
actual file type, so something you can
Yep, so the name of the file, like
That's
the
actually really interesting
metadata of
because
things.
by the user selecting a file is implicitly granting you as the website the permission to read that file.
Yep.
So we're already done. We can now read this file and work on it, which is what we want.
Yep.
So that's cool.
So let's say the file that we want to access will be const file equal e.target dot files, and then the first one in there. Now we have access to all the information, but we have to actually load it in the browser.
Yes.
We only got the metadata.
Yeah, it's like an
browser
object representing the file,
Right.
not the actual contents.
The browser hasn't figured that out. So in order to do that, we make a file reader. So
Oh, I have touched on the file reader API, not on stream, but I have used it before. It's not the nicest API to use, but I guess you'll see now.
So file reader is name of the, as it suggests, it just reads the file, and it comes with a lot of methods to read. So one way to read a file is read as data URL, which basically returns a basic, if it's image, basic 64 representation of the file.
OK.
So I created the file reader here on the line
I guess
30.
it's interesting to note that most of you probably have seen data URLs somewhere, like when you inline a little icon in CSS. I think in most browsers, these are limited to 2 megabytes. So if you want to use, in this case, we might want to load a bigger image later on. So that would probably not be a good choice for us. But we're going to start with it.
Yep. So, and then once you read the file, you have to do something once the reading is done, because it is, done, what do you call it? Like asynchronously?
Yeah.
You basically have to listen to onload event. So
yeah.
I would add a file reader dot event listener. Oops, and then load.
So somebody asked, why are you using const? Is it necessary?
That's a good question. I don't know. I started using const. I started basically ditch every var and replace it with
so
const.
I think on some stream previously we talked about this. There used to be, everything in JavaScript used to be var. And now there is let and const with ES 2015. And I mostly use const because it signifies to the next person who reads my code that the value of that variable is not going to change anymore. It's just something that makes, like, you have to juggle less state in your head when you read the code. So I try to only use const and let. And also the advantage is they're block scoped rather than function scoped, which in JavaScript is the default and very confusing at times.
Yep. So I just created a file reader, read it as a data URL, pass the file. And the file reader, I added an event listener for load event. So now if I load it, I get the event back. And inside of the event, again, within the target, I get the result here, which is a base64 representation of the image that we loaded.
It's beautiful. I can practically see the image.
So let's say const image data. Well, that's going to be confusing. So img is e.target.result, right? So now we need to somehow put this data into the browser so that browser shows an image, right?
Yes.
Easier way to do it is making an image object. So again, image, new image. I just simply deleted the semicolon. You made a comment recently about my code.
I did. I personally am a big proponent of using semicolons in JavaScript. Mariko's not. I disapprove.
I don't have any strong philosophical belief or anything. I just worked in a company for 2 years that.
And I think that's the thing. It's mostly an
just like
acquired taste.
engraved,
The way you start coding is the way you're going to keep coding.
I mean, if somebody makes me like, you should, or like, let's say like our team decides like everybody should write like semicolon. Like I would happily adapt it, but like there's no mandate here. So. Like,
I mean, we have a Google ESLint configuration which will demand semicolons, but I mean, I have ESLint now on most of my projects, but for this, Supercharged is a production-ready code, so who cares?
Yep. So I created an image object on line 31, and then now I assign the base64 representation of that. Or let's say this base64, and then src, much like the attribute on the image tag 64, and now. Once this operation is done, then the load event will be fired for this image object. So once that's done, I need to append that image object into the screen, right? So let's check if this works. So document.body.append child image, and let's see if this works. Click it, click. Yay!
We just loaded an image with a file selector.
Yeah.
That's pretty damn cool.
Yep. For the reason that comes in later, I'm just going to wrap this in div so that again,
you can always add divs.
I just need to like kind of like, I'm not a designer, but I need to style something, Okay. Oops. Oh, right. So now that we have a user select image, data image is, grabbed from the memory, put it into browser. Let's put it into, so that we can apply the filter as the original plan, right?
So I guess you can't do that on the image element, but you need a canvas.
Yes. So image element is great, but it doesn't have a finer way of like tweaking things. I know you can use a CSS to put like a filter.
But that's not the point today.
But like, that is like very specified thing. And that's not the point. Like, that is like offloading our math problem to CSS. Like we want to do the math on the JavaScript so that we can use WebWorker. So let's make a canvas where all of this
just
happen.
Recently published an article about how expensive a blur is, and if you animate a blur, you will probably see a lot of jank. I'll link to it in the description later on if you want to read that, and you should, because I wrote it, and I would appreciate you reading my articles.
I did. It was a wonderful article.
Yeah, so and the point is today we want to use a WebWorker eventually to offload heavy work, but that article basically explains why a blur is so computation intensive, even though it is like a simple effect in terms of what it looks like.
Get context 2D. So I suppose I should explain this part if like somebody have not done canvas work.
Yes.
So canvas, much like any other HTML element, you just create a canvas tag, right?
An element, yeah.
Yep, and then you can reference it by ID or class or however you would do.
Typoed the ID.
Oops, what?
The V is missing.
Oh, VU.
And the I. There you go.
So that's what's happening here, $sign preview. However, in order to do a lot of like computational work on Canvas, you have to define the language that they are speaking. So and going with like a planet explanation, let's say you decided to, I don't know, you are a master creator, so you decided to create this planet, right? Yeah. And then you decided
as you're known to do on Friday.
You decided to speak, I'm going to speak this one language, which is WebGL. And then
which
you
we did last time.
Yep. So you would say, the WebGL use specific thing called shader, and then that's how you communicate with this Canvas planet. In my case, I want to use 2D, which is another set of language, and that's called context. So whenever you define that language part of the Canvas, you call get context. And if you're trying to do the shaders, you would say WebGL, but this time I'm getting the 2D context. And basically, preview CTX context. Context is the one you interact.
That's the actual manipulation API.
Yep. So like, the canvas, you can maybe set the width and height of the canvas,
Yeah,
and that's about it.
That's pretty much
Yeah.
it. Like if you do the WebGL canvas, you get all the functions to load triangles to the GPU, to upload textures, and in this case, you get functions to draw lines, draw circles, whatever you want to do as a 2D operation.
Yep. So instead of loading image as in child element, now I put a image into the canvas and call the method, the help method that canvas has, which is draw image, which basically takes an image element and put it into the canvas. So let's do the thing and see if it shows up. Oop, error. Oh, okay. When you're drawing the image, your first argument is the image object that you're putting to, and then you need to give the location where you want to draw.
I wish that was just have sensible defaults, but sadly, this function does not.
So I want to draw it 4 sides, so I would say the top left corner has to be 0, 0, xy. So 0 and 0, and hopefully this should draw a picture into canvas. Hey! So
I mean, part of the image is missing, but that's good.
So it's inside of the canvas, right? It's not an image element anymore. So I know why this is missing, because we only created canvas, and default size for canvas, I think it's 200 pixel by 400. If you
I
just
thought it was 300 by 150.
Oh, maybe.
Like an iPhone.
I only remember 1 by 2.
Yeah, that might be true.
Yeah, so we just need to set the size. So in here, I would say preview is the name of the canvas. So preview.width.
Ah, so you're going to resize the canvas before
install.
drawing the image, which makes a lot of sense. Because a lot of people apparently are very interested in the soldering iron. It is real, it's just not switched on. And why would it be? That would just be dangerous. You would.
What? Soldering what?
The soldering iron.
Oh, yeah.
It is real. I'll tell you that.
There we go. So now
Hurrah!
Shows up on the great screen.
All right.
Let's just make maybe. I'm gonna do really bad technique of putting BR.
I am disgusted.
Because all I care is how it looks.
And that's how bad websites are born. Welcome to Supercharged.
Does it even work? Yeah.
Of course it does.
Later, if I was pushing this, I will clean up with nice padding and everything and check with designer, but for now.
Right.
What I need to do? Oh, yes. So now that the data is in Canvas, we can also get the data out of Canvas.
We can read back the pixels.
Yep. So let's just switch up this thing and make it like a function. So apply filter is a function, and then we will have a separate function.
I was about to say that's a function that you're going to write. It's not a function yet.
Right.
Now it is.
Oh, I can't type.
You have the excuse of having to type on a foreign keyboard. Not only in terms of layout, but also on our streaming laptop, which you probably have.
See, this is the thing. It's not showing up, but the enter key is so small on the British thing.
It's bigger than on the. I guess it's taller, but narrower.
Yes.
While on the American, it's like wider, and whatever you're used to, you will totally mess up once you're on the other keyboard. It's horrible. When I go to America, I can't type anymore. And for you, it's basically the same just now.
Yep. So Canvas has this very handy method called getImageData and putImageData.
You wrote with here, I think.
Ooh.
How did this work? Just by coincidence? Probably. Love it.
Maybe, yeah.
All right.
Okay, all right. Apply filter. In order to apply
Thanks for the chat.
In order to apply the filter, you need to get the chunk of pixel data, and then you need to analyze those pixel data and then change something about that pixel data. Right now, we're only interacting with the HTML element. We don't have that data element, right? So in order to do those, Canvas has a method called getImageData and putImageData.
Yeah.
So the easier way to explain to me is like this. So imagine this is a canvas, right? You have a canvas. you go through context, right? Context dot call get image data.
Yeah.
And then you get on the parameter, you can specify where that should start and how big.
So you can like you can get like a sub rectangle of the entire
so
image.
you
as
have
image data.
like
Okay, cool.
4 arguments, and then you get data, and then make it pretty, the data pretty, and then you pass that data into put image data method, and then put it back into the screen.
Okay, cool.
So that's what we're gonna do.
So basically, you're going to take the image out, do some processing, and then put it back in,
Yep.
and that's how you do effects.
Yeah. So let's see what that data that we've been talking about
Yeah.
look like. So say I already have a context, so preview context. Dot get image data and 0, 0, and it would be image dot width.
We were using that. That makes sense.
Image dot height. Yeah.
Yep.
And let's see. And console
Cool.
log distance.
So what exactly is like? What is the image data? Is it like a special type, or is it just an array, or?
So image data is a special, I guess, oops.
It's an error.
Image data is not a function.
I think the I needs to be counted.
Oh, yeah. So it's a special, what do you call it? Object or data type?
A type. It's
Yeah,
a type.
type.
Okay.
So you can see,
So. Okay, keep going.
yeah, they have 3 data in there,
Yeah.
width and height. And
Makes
then
sense.
inside of that data is a array. And the array,
Typed array. No
typed array, yep. Array is
This is
a-
the feature I love of DevTools, where you can like how many 360,000 element array, and you can inspect every single one of those cells.
So you can see here is the data about
Okay.
a whole bunch of numbers.
Okay, but those are just numbers, not really like. What do
Yes.
those numbers represent?
So, yes. This represents the image that's on screen here.
Yes.
It's like already on the canvas. But it is arranged in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like one-dimensional whole bunch of numbers.
Yeah.
And the way I think about it is so it comes in the set of 4. So from 0
okay.
to 3 is a data you need to represent 1 pixel.
Okay. So
And you might have guessed it, it's RGB and alpha.
that's why every 4th value just now is 255, because we
Yes.
don't have intransparency going on.
Yes.
Okay, so every group of 4 forms 1 pixel, and then these 4 elements in individual groups form the R value, the G value, the B value, and the alpha value, as you might know from CSS. So you can
Yep.
probably handle that.
One thing that changed from the CSS is that in the CSS, if you do RGBA to set the color, the last value, it would be 0 to 1. But in the canvas case, it will be 0 to 255.
Okay.
Yep, because the thing that we're using it is 255. So you may ask, like, but it's flat. How do you know where in position that
That sounds like
pixel
math.
is located, right? So when you are writing letter to somebody, and I don't know if you do this in German. I suppose you grew up in Germany. So in Japan, if you're writing a paper or letter, you would get this graph paper. It's like, so each square is for 1 letter, right?
Yeah.
So in my head, I'm thinking in the one-dimensional way of like, hi, Surma, it's like one-dimensional. I wouldn't think about like, here's going to be line break or anything, right?
That makes sense. So
and then
basically,
I'm going to write it from the top left corner, say, hi, Surma, and then once I run out of the space, I go to the next row.
I see.
And then fill in what's in my head as a one-dimensional data, right? It's the same thing. So from here, the first 4 is the top left corner, and then next one is the first row, but the second from the left.
So it goes to the right until we reach the width, which we have in our image data
Yep.
object. So we know once we have 300 times 4
Yep.
array, and we go back to the first pixel,
Yep.
the next line.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
That makes
so
sense.
Because we have the width and height and a whole bunch of data, we can deconstruct this.
Okay, cool.
And we know where exactly which number is for which pixel of
right.
which color channel.
And now we can probably jumble around with those numbers and make the image look different.
Yep. So let's see. In order to do this, this is very tedious part. So as I mentioned, we were just like explaining this. We have to do this in code, right? So
I'm smelling for loops.
yes.
Yes.
So for loops.
So for everyone who has joined just a couple of minutes late than we started, welcome. This is Mariko.
Hello.
I'm Surma. We said we're going to do WebWorkers. We haven't even touched the WebWorkers yet. So far, we have been loading images from the hard disk and drawing them onto a canvas so that we then can process them and show. I don't know, Mariko's coding, not me. How would I know what we're doing? I'm monitoring the chat. So if you have questions, just put them in the chat, and I'll try to follow along. We're very many people today, so it's kind of hard actually to keep track of where I stop reading and where I have to catch up. But yeah, keep sending those questions, and Mariko will tell you how to do image processing in JavaScript, and then later on, what WebWorkers has to do with it.
Yeah. So.
So OK, we're doing the classical.
Yeah, if you've dealt with Canvas, this is like engraved into your heart that you are like you do those things. But I will explain what's happening in a minute. There should be parentheses, and there should be D. So.
Are you sure? Oh, index. Yeah, that's probably 4, right? Should that also be a times? Another plus?
Yes. Surma knows the image processing.
We have done this before. Yes. I mean, not us, but I have done pixel traversion on images before.
Right. So what's happening is the outer for loop is X, so going through this direction. And inner for loop is Y, so going through this direction.
Yes.
So in combination of those, you get to do
every pixel.
Every pixel. However, every pixel, remember, has 4 values. So index has to be padded with 4.
Yes. So if we increase the index by 1, we have to jump 4 fields. And that's why it's times 4.
Yeah.
OK.
Can I show off my drawing? Because I'm leaving
I would love for you to show off your drawings.
So here is the visual explanation of what I just said. Right?
All right.
So the outer loop is the green. Oh, in this case, I actually did Y. Sorry.
Doesn't matter, really.
Yeah. So the green one goes down from top to bottom. And then the orange one is the X and go from left to right. And then inside of that, you have index. And you get to access each pixel by index +1, index +2, index +3. And
yes,
you get to
that makes
do
sense.
something cool thing happen once you have access to those things.
We're going to do the cool thing as well. Don't you worry.
So let's see. Let's say changing opacity, maybe? That's an easy
that
one.
sounds good. Sounds easy enough.
The last one is the opacity. So alpha is image data that we have. Inside of image data, we access data. And then inside of that, index +3 is where all of the alpha channel lives. And then right now, it's all 255. So I'm just going to set it to 72 or 27. And then let's see if I actually get to, I need to put back into the data. So,
OK, so now we have changed the 4th value in each pixel pack, the A value, to 127, which is basically 50% opacity. And it's +3 because, as always in program, we start at 0. So 0 is the first pixel. And so +3 is the 4th value.
So I just changed all of the value, which is in the image data.data, right? And then I put that data back here on this line. So hopefully, this picture will come as a slightly opaque. Hey!
Nice. We just have done image processing.
Yep. So we can do we can totally do the thing where let's see, with changing the thing, I think Matt did like a warm
Yeah, he did a warm filter in the end.
or something. So R is a red value. So I think what he did was like increase the red value a little bit to make it like a
I think he had like a factor, and he would go a little bit, add to the red and subtract from the blue, depending on how high the warmth value was supposed to be.
OK. Well, let's just do the simple thing of like, so red is where the first one, so index, right?
Basically, we're going to make Jake's face more red, which is what he looks like once he has seen the sun.
True. Oh, that's a good one. and then
Literally
times
burn.
1.1 or something. Well, 1.2. Let's see, right? So
Because the first is the red value, you're increasing the red value. Okay.
So
And interesting fun fact, because the image data.data is a clamped uint8 array, if we go above 255, it will automatically stick to 255.
I love this feature. I love
And the
it.
same with 0. You can't go negative with a clamped uint8 array, which makes it super handy for this kind of image data.
Yep. So choose Jake's image.
Definitely more red.
Definitely more red. You seem like nicely tanned color.
I never do in real life, though.
So that's good.
Yes.
And this seems working fine.
Yeah.
But you know, in real life, the photo we take on the phone is like much bigger.
That's true. I mean, this
So-
picture, I think we saw in DevTools was 300 by 300.
Nobody takes those photos.
No, nobody does.
And I want to keep, like, I don't want to like resize it to make it like fast,
Yeah.
right? I want to keep the original size.
Of
I
course.
basically want to recreate Photoshop
You don't want to lose
inside-
quality just because you did some, just some touch-ups.
Yeah. So I have a big file, the cat JPEG, and once I open it, visibly, this is very
Well,
slow.
nothing happened. Oh, it just, so like it didn't not work. It just took that long to
Yep.
draw and process the image. Okay.
Yep.
That is a little bit long, I have to say. And also, we wrote this on the main thread JavaScript, so probably the browser just froze.
Yeah, so let's like investigate, right? So you might need to help me here because I'm not a expert on the thing. But as I heard, you just hit record.
That is
and
correct.
then do something that you want to record and wait for it to happen.
Okay, so DevTools is still working. It still hasn't appeared on screen. There it is.
Stop it.
And let's see what DevTools said. DevTools says there is one massive red bar at the top. You never want to see those red bars because that's what we call jank. That is when the main thread is blocked and basically cannot react to user inputs like scrolling or clicking a button. You never want to see those. If you do, you have a jank problem most likely and have to investigate how to fix them.
Yeah.
So that screen, I think if you remember Paul Lewis, he always said you have a frame budget of 16 milliseconds. You shouldn't be doing any more calculation in your JavaScript per frame than 60 milliseconds. This was 6 seconds. That's too much, Mariko.
Yeah, and I to be fair, like I doubt it will go down to 60 frames per second.
No,
with
right?
its 2D canvas.
The image is just that big. There's not much we
Image is
can do
just that
about it.
big, but we can minimize it so that the user can have a kind of break point so that they can interact with
Okay.
device. It's like a perception of the speed is faster. you know.
Okay.
Fake it till you make it.
That's right. That's what we call performance.
Yes. So let's do this. The first thing that is very blocking, and it help me if you can point it, loading the image part.
I mean, there's the load event. Oh, that's when it's already loaded, right?
Yeah, function call, add event listener.
So, we go quiet. What are you looking for?
The image loading part. I suspect this chunk is where file leader.
Yeah.
We were leading the file. So I happen to know it's not that new, but it's newer than WebWorker.
True.
That
I mean, pretty much anything is newer than WebWorker, almost.
So, do you know what it is that I'm going to use?
Is it create image bitmap?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Hey. So there are the API
Yes.
called create image bitmap, which allow you to pass a file data and magically creates an image for you.
So this will allow us, also to not only make the image decoding be a janky process, but it will also avoid the file reader API.
Yep. So
Yes!
I do not need file reader API anymore. I don't
That is
need
so much
to
better.
listen to the thing. I don't need to listen to the image. I still do, maybe.
Yeah, you still want to know when the image.
Right, but I can delete the file reader
And that's good.
for sure. Create image bitmap is a promise based. So
Nice.
once
I'm
things
a
are
big fan
done,
of promises.
you call it with then,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Or an async function. Oh, we can use then. That's fine. It's completely valid. Just saying.
Do you want to do it?
No. This is your code. If I would take over right now, the first thing I would have to do is add semicolons to every line. So we're not doing that. You keep coding.
So bitmap. See. Now the return value from this create image bitmap promise should be the image, right? So you can append that to image.soc. Wait. No. No. You directly go to the canvas. So let's just console log this. I don't remember what it was.
Yeah. So basically, you want to just see what kind of type you get back.
Yeah. So let's just do the small one before we go into the thing. Okay. So image bitmap.
Just has height and width.
Yes.
Done.
And then I remember this API only exports width and height to
As
developers,
properties.
right? Yeah.
But they can be methods.
Yeah. It is a representation of the data, right? So I can directly draw that into Canvas, I think, because it's already image, and Canvas already have a draw image method.
Okay.
So let's see. I take this code here, and then move it to inside of then.
So we actually don't need the image event listener anymore.
Yeah, I think we can delete it.
That's cool.
So preview width would be the bitmap width.
Okay.
And then the preview height will be bitmap height. And then preview CTX draw image would be the bitmap. I don't need a console log. And fingers crossed. This is not needed. Fingers crossed this image will load.
I have the greatest of faith in you.
Huh?
Still works.
Yeah.
We're good to go.
Yep.
All right, so we now have avoided the image element. We have avoided the file reader API, which is good. So create image bitmap. I think the reason it got introduced is exactly for this reason. So you can decode an image, get the image data without having to jank the main thread. Yeah. It's in Chrome. It's in Safari.
It's in Firefox.
It's in Firefox.
But not supported in Edge or Safari.
But they have it on their radar, as far as I know. I'm not sure if they have it under consideration or in development, but they definitely know it's a thing, and they know it's a thing a developer wants. So
then, as far as I know, in Chrome they do this cool thing where the decoding of image, which is the most expensive part, they do it off the UI thread. So you can see those in a network. Start recording, do this thing, stop, and then you can see like less.
You should.
Yeah, like much smaller thing. However, this here.
The task scheduler renderer foreground worker. Now that's a name. That's great. So that's basically.
There you go, image decode.
So the image decode is happening in a worker that Chrome spun up, which means it's on a different thread, so it doesn't block the main thread, and that's what we want.
Yeah.
That's good, so especially for bigger images.
Yeah, I think as of like a year ago, it was decoding image on the context that called. So if you called it from UI thread, then it will decode it in the UI thread.
Yeah.
If you call it from WebWorkers thread, then it will decode it in Worker thread. And I think Paul Lewis wrote a helper library to make it easier for you so that you can load it fast. And I'm sure you can find it on our GitHub thing. But Chrome since then changed it so that like any image will be off the thread.
Okay.
Which is amazing. So that was the one half part of it, but then we haven't figured out the apply filter part. So
yeah, so the apply filter part is the one that still makes it super slow and not nice.
Yep. So apply filter, we can delete this part. And this is when we get to use WebWorkers.
Finally! After a good amount of setup work, we now have reached the point where the workers come into play.
Yep. So what we're going to do is, as we saw it, this part of going through each pixel and doing something was really expensive.
Yeah, if you have, like, the other image is like, what, 4,000 by 3,000 or something? So it's like 12 million pixels. That's going to take a while in JavaScript.
Yep.
So,
but this part, the lucky part is that this doesn't touch the DOM. This doesn't touch the UI. This doesn't have to do anything. It just needs to do the math.
It just has to have the array, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So we can load these to the worker thread. So refresher of how worker works.
More drawings. Love it.
So again, there's two threads that we're dealing with. One is a UI thread or main thread that you call it, which is where you deal with the DOM and UI, and then you spawn up a web worker thread. Let me go dive into the code.
Yeah,
I
go
really
for it.
like the style of annotating the code and kind of like picture book code. So let me explain what's going to happen. So inside of your application, we are going to create a worker, which is a new web worker. And then you pass a name of the JavaScript file that you want to execute in the worker thread. That is kind of like launching a International Space Station. Now you are starting.
We are launching
something-
International Space Stations.
Something you can communicate with, right? So now go back to the worker thread side. If you want to use external library, it's kind of, I think it's similar to web service worker, right? Import script.
Yes, it's exactly the same thing.
The word you use to.
So just to be sure, service worker not supported in in all browsers. Like Edge is just now working with it. I think they're close to launching. Who knows? Apple has announced they're working on it. Firefox has it. Chrome has it. Workers without the service bit. Every browser, even old Internet Explorer, has these.
Yep.
Just to be very clear about this.
Just
This
to be
is
clear.
not like bleeding edge technology. This is 2001 technology, I think, or something.
So yeah, you create a worker.js with whatever that you want to do. You launch it from your application side, and then now it lives in a different thread of the memory. How do you communicate those data, right? Like I'm sure we use satellite to send the data to International Space Station in real life. I don't know what kind of technology they use.
Lasers.
Do they use internet?
It's probably lasers.
Anyway, so that communication is done by post message
Yeah.
and on message event. So from the application side, you call post message with the data you want to pass, and then on the worker side, you listen to on message event.
Yeah.
And I kind of like drew it like you do all the clicky thing while expensive stuff happens on the worker side. And
good.
once the worker is done, then they use the same thing, post message, to send the new data or new information that they calculated back to the main side. And now main side can listen to on message. And like if you need to terminate it, you can terminate it. And I kind of like put it into like guiding
That's
them
horrible. We have this man-made glorious object, the International Space Station, and you want to throw it into a black hole.
I could have come up with good ending for WebWorkers.
Well, I mean, the alternative would have been just send it into the Earth's atmosphere and let it burn.
Yeah,
so,
that's,
I mean,
that's sad. Like,
it's just a
black
sad.
hole is a little
Let's
more
go with black
romantic.
holes, like
Yeah, a little
new
more
frontiers
romantic.
kind of
Yeah,
approach
yeah,
to things.
yeah.
So let's go with that.
Yeah. So let's create a web worker. Worker, new worker. And then I need to pass the file. So I need
Yeah.
to make new file.
New file.
What's the shift key for this?
Every key is different here.
Worker.js. So now I can reference this with.
So that will basically just download the browser will go download the file, create a new JavaScript thread, load that file in that thread, and then you have control over a separate thread just for yourself.
Yep. So as I mentioned, worker takes a listen to on. Let's do the post message first. So I created the worker. I want to pass the data to worker so that worker can deal with it. So worker.post is message M capitalized? Again, API is so hard for me. Message.
So if you haven't used post message, it's just what it sounds like. It posts a message over to whatever you're post messaging to. And post message can send JavaScript objects, but only objects. So you will lose, as it's called, the prototype chain. So if you have, like, for example, a class instance, it will not arrive as a class instance on the other side, but as a simple JavaScript object. But it's usually good enough if you have just do a little like JSON style object. Be like, this is what I want to do. This is my parameters, and which is probably what you're going to do right now.
So I created a post message, send the image data. As I mentioned, this for loop needs to go to worker thread. So let's go to worker thread, worker file. And this one will come into play later. But let's create a on message handler. How would you do this? Self dot on message, or what do you usually do?
I would usually just say, and I have to blame Jake for this because he basically said, oh, self is unnecessary, so I stopped using self. I would just say add event listener message. But if you want to use the on message, I would probably use self on message.
Do I need to reference anything here, or?
No, you can just.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I know, right?
Because I think on the drawing, I still use the self.onMessage. I think I just like use whatever the Google developer site explained it to me. Or maybe HTML5 locks explained it to me.
There's probably an HTML5 rocks out there for this.
Yes. So message event will be fired. And let's see. So this, it's called D, data, should be the data we passed.
Yeah.
And I want to see if what this looks like actually. So again, console log, the greatest tool. Let's see.
And that's
how it
also
looks like.
something that is good to know. If you want to work with workers, the debugging story around workers is actually fairly good. So console logs from your worker will just appear in your DevTools just as well. So you will be able to use this approach to debugging.
Is 0, index 44. Something is not working. Oh, because we're not using that image anymore. We're directly loading that
Correct.
to the thing. So this should be the size of preview now, because we set the width and height there, so I can reference it with Canvas. Okay, so let's hope this works. Do the thing. There, message event. And then inside of that, I have a data, where data is exactly the representation of the image data we dealt with.
Yeah.
So inside of the worker, I get to access data.data.data.
So this was a big image, but transferring it was surprisingly fast. Why?
Oh, well, supposed to be this shouldn't be fast.
True. Why was it fast? Either way, so the image data contains an array buffer, and typed array buffer. And typed array buffers are JavaScript version of actual chunks of memory rather than abstract objects you can pass around. And Postmessage has the ability to transfer those, which means instead of copying the entire image, it will actually transfer them. So no copying necessary. The main thread will lose access to this typed array buffer, and the worker will get access to it, right?
Yep. So basically, like let's say you and I have memory.
Yeah.
Field, right? I have this image data here, and then I want to pass it to worker. Worker, if I don't, on this line 46, if I don't have anything specified, then
copy it.
This is like literally copied into your field. However, if I specify an argument, which we'll get to, then it will basically says just move the pointer.
It moves
reference.
ownership.
Yep.
Like you lose ownership, I get ownership, and no copying needs to happen.
Yep. So
and that's good.
And it's the weird API where like you have to pass an array.
It's a bit weird.
And like specify things. So in this case, image data.data is the
actual
typed array.
array.
Yep. Dot buffer.
Right, because typed array buffer, like there's array buffers, which are the chunks of memory, and then there's the typed arrays, which are views onto these buffers, because you can interpret the same chunk of memory as like a series of floats or a series of 8-bit integers. And we want to transfer the buffer, not the interpretation of the buffer, which is, I guess, the distinction, which it's still a little bit weird, but maybe that's a good way to think about it.
Yeah. This is like a little quirky bit that when you're dealing with worker that you have to encounter, I guess, unfortunately. So inside of the worker, the image data is the one that we want to access. So let's say image data is the .data, right? And then we can basically access same thing. So let's do the same computation of making the face red inside of
the face red operation.
Well, warm filter, not the face red filter.
I like face red operation much better as a name. Seems like better branding to me.
Okay, so I have a whole bunch of weird reference that I need to. So let's say width is inside of image data. So width w is image data dot width. Height is
just make it a bit more readable. That's good.
Dot, and then data, the one that we are actually dealing with is image data. Okay, So now I need to tweak this a little bit. Oh, enter key.
Backslash.
Oops. Height, index.
Yes.
BW, data
That looks good.
index.
All right, it's just data now. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
And now,
So now we copied. So we sent the buffer to the worker. The worker did the same thing as before, like went through all the pixels, did all the red manipulation. Now we need to send it back?
yep.
Okay.
So we need to send it back on a post message. So wait, so if you are in the add event listener, how do I send it to post message?
Isn't it a global? Just post? I think in workers it's just a global.
Self.post message.
Yeah, just go post message.
Okay.
It gets more complicated if you talk about service worker, because everybody can talk to the service worker, but the service worker can talk to all the open websites. So you actually need to define which window to talk to. And that's a whole different story. In this case, we have it nice and simple. We just call post message.
Yeah, it's weird for me to not like reference self, but I guess if Jake says self is not necessary, then it's not necessary. Okay, so supposedly we do all the things and then send the use a post message to send the data that it was passed.
Yeah.
Because we manipulated inside of the data in this
Wait,
for
wait.
loop.
Is D the data or is D the event? Because you're now sending back the event and you want to.
Oh, that's true. So I have to do the image data. Yes.
And also have to do the transfer bit again, right?
Yes.
Sorry. This is where you can tell that the Postmatch API is really old, because it feels pretty inconsistent with the rest of the web. But that is also, the charm of the web, kind of like that's how it landed, and that's what we got now. And it still works, so we'll make it work.
Yep. So now sent it, but then we need to listen to it. So we can, this is bad inside of doing it. Would you do it outside of this function?
Yeah, you've done it so far. Why not? Yeah, just do the.
Event listener message. And let's see, inconsistency, let's make it D. And if this pattern is repeating, then D.data should be image data. So
Sounds about right. We're copying and pasting lines now. This is proper code reuse.
And then put that data into the canvas.
All right. Ooh, I'm nervous.
Let's hope this works. Yes!
So, it looks the same, but something a whole lot different just happened. Let's do the performance check right away. So basically what is going on now is that we're doing the same thing as before, but all the expensive processing is happening in a different thread, meaning there shouldn't be any red bars if we do a performance analysis on this.
Code, set it, done. How's that?
OK. That looks pretty short. And we can see the dedicated worker thread is what we are using.
Yep.
Has some work to do.
Yep. So function call to worker.js happened in dedicated worker thread.
OK.
So previously, all of this, right, this part was clogged inside.
You can mark regions with shift, by the way, shift and click.
Shift and click? What?
Shift, click, and hold, and you can mark regions.
Ooh.
And you can measure how wide they are.
Oh. TIL.
Performance pro tip.
So previously, this whole chunk of yellow was living in here, which means it was blocking users' interaction. If they want to click on something or like you want to do another JavaScript operation, it was just blocking.
Yeah.
And now you put it put it into worker thread.
I mean,
So
the
now
ultimate test is now load the big image, right?
Yep.
And see if we have a 6-second frame or if the frame rate keeps going.
Something better, right? Yeah. So let's do
Recording.
big image.
Get that cat in there. That was also quicker.
Yeah, visually quicker.
So here's an interesting fun fact, something I recently learned. If you look at the bar graph at the top, the little mountains thing, when something is striped, it means it's off main thread. So it means something is happening, but it's not blocking the main thread. It's good. And as you can see, there is no red bars because we are never blocking the main thread with this version because we're using decode image, get image bitmap, create image bitmap, create image bitmap, and the worker. Yeah, so good.
Yeah, so that's pretty much it, right?
Nice.
Do you want to do anything to other things?
No, I mean,
or-
we're perfectly on time once again, as on Supercharged it is common. Thank you so much for traveling all the way just for this. We're
You're
gonna,
welcome.
as Mariko promised, she is of course going to clean up the code or just give it to me. I'm going to put it on the GitHub repository, which I'm going to put in the video description once the video is up on YouTube. Thanks everybody for coming and talking to us in the chat. Been super active today. I was really, really happy to see that. As I already announced on Twitter, this is the last live stream for the 2017 season. It's time for a little Christmas break. But I'm going to be back. We're going to be back in 2018 with many more things I want to try. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned something. If you have more questions, you can ask Mariko, not me. Or me. It's OK. You can ask me too.
Yeah, Twitter. Or like, ask the Chromium Dev Twitter.
Also go to Chromium Dev. We're pretty responsive there.
Yeah.
And
Which actually, we are the two active person who's watching
You're
that.
mostly going to get replies from either Mariko or
Yeah.
me if you tweet at Chromium Dev.
Yeah.
If you want to, stay up to date with Supercharged, live streams, micro tips, maybe even totally tooling tips, who knows? Subscribe to this channel so you get like little notifications when we put out a new video or we go live the next time. Thanks for watching, and I will see you all in 2018.